today, everybody, to HR Recruit's webinar about World of Culture and Communication in the Workplace, a Legal Perspective. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Robin Watson, Employment Law Solicitor from View HR. Robin will explore some of the key legal concepts around culture and communication, considering the hugely challenging times that HR professionals have had to deal with. The structure of today is that Robin will be sharing some of the key thoughts and insights he has as an advisor to employers and HR professionals. And towards the end of the session, there is an opportunity for you to ask questions using the chat box at the bottom of the screen. There is no email facility, contrary to what Zoom may have informed you. I'm now going to hand you over to Robin, who will introduce himself and start the webinar.
Thanks, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody. So I can't see anyone, which is really frustrating. I'm talking to myself and Joe, but I'm going to assume there are far more people than just the two of us on here. And welcome back. It's great to be here. I was here about a year ago with HR Recruits and had a fantastic session. We were doing neurodiversity with a load of legal updates thrown in. So I had a really great time last time and a really engaging discussion on the chat. So please keep that going. You don't have to agree with what I say. I'm not here to say I'm the expert in all things. And I think, as I said last time, I'm very aware that I've got some audacity to come to speak to you about HR issues and principles, especially cultures and core values, which normally solicitors tend to leave very much to HR frontline. But that said, the nature of the work that I've done previously and the nature of the work very much I do now gets me really into bed with those cultures and those core values with companies. So it's all said with greatest respect, but really today, as Joe said, is a combination of me looking at the past 12 or 24 months. I don't want to go down the realm of COVID and hybrid working and the new normal, because frankly, there's far more solicitors out there talking about it than needs to be. I think we all know where we are with that to an extent, or maybe we don't. But what I've done is try to encapsulate what goes through my mind when people say to me, what are the big issues you see? What are the hot topics that interest you now? Where are the risks? What are the problems? And really that's what the next 45 minutes or so is about. It's me, in some respects, having a rant about some of the failures I see in companies and in HR, without any blame to HR, because we know that to a great extent they are controlled and directed from above. And very often what I'll do in a case is work backwards and talk to the HRD or the HR manager about where I thought it went wrong, and we'll do that together. So hopefully today is going to give you a bit of insight in that. And if this all makes sense to you and you're sat there thinking, well, that's not me, I've got no problems, then brilliant, well done. I'll buy your book when you write it. But hopefully there'll be something which chimes with you and says, well, that might be me, or that might be my team or my environment that needs to think about. So before we get on to the who's and the whys and the wherefores, I also just want to express I've tried as best I can to have this webinar on a number of different levels. I fully appreciate there's a whole range of different HR experience and knowledge and qualifications in the virtual room. And normally if we were together in a room, I'd probably be speaking to people, find out who they are in their background. We can't do that. So in some respects, there's nothing wrong with going back to basics. In fact, when I used to run the employment team with solicitors, I used to insist they would at least once a year go back to employment or basics or something to do with basic law and advice, because I think that's really good for us to do so, because we then keep up to date from the foundation and work upwards. But I've tried to make it interesting. I've tried to make it at very different levels. We're going to have some technicality later. No HR talk is worth it without TUPE, so there's a bit of that later as well, just to make sure you eat sandwiches now. And then we can hopefully have a discussion later of anything that arises, or you may not agree. And I'll also ask for your inputs and your experience on some of the topics. So without further ado, who am I? Well, being somewhat modest, I don't like to really talk about myself too much, but to give you some idea of why you think, or why I might think I'm able to speak to you like this today. I've previously come from an environment in corporate law, mainly as an employment solicitor running an employment team, and was responsible in a leading law firm for the entire HR of everyone employed by us, which is around about 125 people. So the difference with me is that I like to think in a very big way. I've been there at the thick of it. I've dismissed people, I've recruited people, I've run grievances, I've dealt with suicidal people, I've dealt with people who are making serious discrimination complaints, and I've dealt with capability and welfare issues as well, at least once every single one of those. So I like to think when I'm talking to you about these issues, it's not just another solicitor giving you another boring topic on the law, I'm giving you practical examples of what I've been through as well. What I do now is somewhat slightly different. So I'm a director of UHR, mainly in employment law consultancy, but as the in-house solicitor, what I do is give the more technical and contentious advice to our clients, and very much more now consultative, dealing with training. And I work at a boardroom level and below, really, on training managers, on communication, on culture, and really try to facilitate some discussion. And I guess I see myself as a bit of a challenger, because I like to challenge people in HR professionals about maybe the mishmash between what happens at the top and what happens at the bottom in reality on the coalface. So without further ado again, I just want to point out something. So there is my entire list of qualifications in psychology and psychiatry. Every single one of those has been obtained through the greatest experience and hard study. There are none. And I'm quite open to being criticised to how can I comment on psychology and psychiatry and culture and values with no qualifications. Well, the answer to it is that none of us are. If there are any psychiatrists or psychologists in the room, by all means tell me I'm completely wrong and you can take over. But fundamentally, let's not forget, HR is human resources. And for that extent, we have to make sure we're trying to understand the individual. And one of my mantras when I'm speaking to board level directors or HR managers and team managers in particular is that you have to know your team. You can't know your team unless you know the individuals and you bothered to spend time with them and you're able to get to know them, not personally, but know their situations, know their background, know their triggers, most importantly. And we'll see that later on how it goes really wrong. And it's frustrating from my perspective, although we earn money out of problems that arise in HR, of course we do, the far more enjoyable part of the job is actually working with people on culture, on values, and avoiding claims in the first place. So there's a wonderful quote I always start any training on values and culture with is simply this: culture is strategy for breakfast. And it's absolutely true. I learned the hard way being in charge of HR, which is you can have a wonderful strategy and you can say, this is how we're going to grow a business from 6 to 12, 24 million pound, whatever it may be. And these are the people issues that we have. And then what happens is everyone around the table at the board level, so this is wonderful, we're very good, we're a wonderful engaging family and it's a lovely environment. And at the bottom, there's a complete mishmash and people looking up and saying, I don't recognize any of that. And so what we do, or what I try to do at things like away days or conferences with staff is really admit that the culture is hard to define. I think it's very difficult to define what a culture is. And culture is so often talked about in HR. What is the culture like? What's our culture strategy? What are our core values? But for me, one of the most difficult things and frustrating things to see is when quite simply it's gone wrong. It's all well at the top, but when you start feeding down to the middle managers in particular, and you'll see how I ascribe core strength, as you would in your abdomen, keeping the rest of the body up, your core managers, your middle managers, can make or break a case for you. And I don't actually apologize for making that bold statement. One interaction that goes wrong, and you'll see this later, can create a case. Not only a case, but a case that becomes public, and it might be appealed up to the Employment Appeal Tribunal, and you might be finding yourself Googled round and sent round in webinars and HR updates simply through one interaction. So for me, with culture, it's all well and good talking about culture, but it's got to be fed down, communicated, and managers need to be trained properly in what they do. So covering today, we're covering a great deal. We're looking at communication, culture and communication. I think the two are intertwined. We're looking at bullying. So I think bullying, from my perspective, and again, I do appreciate I see the worst cases. I think it's underestimated, frankly. I think bullying is massively underestimated. I want to have a quick look at stress, out of hours emails, COVID, managing remote teams, risks for employers, and how HR can be the drive for change. And that's not to patronise anyone, but it's really to reinvigorate us, to remember that we should be the challengers. And there's an update later on some employment law issues. There's been a couple of Employment Appeal Tribunal cases that came out brilliantly in the past 3 days, just as I was finishing off my webinar slides. So that was really helpful of them to do so. And I've tried to incorporate those as best I can. But hopefully today is a challenge, but I'm going to start with a hypothesis. And the proposal I make is simply that culture is useless unless the behaviours are challenged and encouraged below. And that's the theme I want to continue with as we go along when we look at the legal side of this. How does culture and legal risk mix together? Well, it's quite obvious really, isn't it? If you've got a toxic environment, whether it be in a team of 2 or a team of 10 or a team of 100, it's going to create legal risk. It's simply obvious, and I don't accept that it won't. There are plenty of my clients, previously especially, that would be quite happy with the toxic environments and very, very hard-driven sales environments, or kitchen environments, as we'll talk a bit later as well, is actually really, really fascinating to look at, because in a way you drive your top performers through being very aggressive, and the culture could be said to be one of determination, results driven. And sometimes it's no surprise when that ends in a clash. But a toxic culture generally is going to be a legal risk to you. And culture, of course, trumps policies and procedures every time. We'll see later about that. I call a policy a hammer. It's got to be picked up and used. And if you use it wrong, it's going to hurt somebody. And the most important thing is decide who you are. As HR, decide who you are and your organisation before the Employment Tribunal tells the world who you are, as we'll see in the case of Sherborne later. I have a confession here. I'm going to cop out with what I was going to do because I'm scared. There is a link here, and it's a link to a Tom Hanks movie, which I think is fantastic, which is A Wonderful Day in the Neighbourhood. I think it's the right title. If you've not seen it, watch it, but never admit to it in the pub. It's not something that goes down very well. But it's a really soft, cuddly movie. And I always talk about this to managers. If you want to watch great management of someone who isn't a manager, just watch Tom Hanks portray this man in this movie. I think it's amazing. And there's one scene I was going to show you, and I didn't, mainly because as an ex-litigator as well, I thought, oh, I could be distributing and communicating a movie. So I thought I better not do it in case one of us gets sued, and it won't be you, it'll be me. But what I am going to do is send some slides out and some updates later on next week for you to look at. But please, if you haven't watched this movie, do watch it. And there's a scene I was going to show you here. And it's fundamental to me about management and HR as well, but we tend to be better at it. But there's a scene in the movie where Tom Hanks effectively is playing a celebrity children's entertainer. And there's a journalist who's trying to get hold of him. And he's a busy man trying to get hold of this guy to have an interview. And we can see the connection there between, I want to talk to my manager, I want to talk to my manager. And so Tom Hanks rings the journalist. And the journalist thinks he's there to make an appointment. I want to book in and see you. But Tom Hanks says this wonderful thing, and I think it's so wonderful. He says, "Do you know what the most important thing is in the world to me now?" And the journalist says, "No." And he says, "Talking to you." And then I asked managers to take a step back and just think for a moment. What's the most important thing for you at the time when you're talking to your team or your employee? Because hands up, often it won't be that individual and what that individual is telling me or talking to me. And as a manager previously, I did this frequently because the environment I was in, I'd have emails pinging in my left-hand corner of my eye here. I'd have my phone making noises at that side. I'd be hungry. I'd have a pen here. I'd fiddle. The phone might ring. The email might ping in that I get really something really important I want to look at. And so the environment for me is really important. And with management by video, MBV as I call it, it's even more disastrous, I think, for management communication, because I suspect if I did a quick survey now, there might be 1 or 2 of you who are looking at emails as I speak. There might be 1 or 2 of you looking at phones, and that's fine, I'm not offended. But if I'm your member of team, and if I'm somebody who reports to you, and you're somebody who manages me, that isn't okay. And so this scene encapsulates for me, in essence, what it is to be a manager and to be a leader today. It is actually to listen. Because when we look at discrimination a bit later, you'll see how important it is to recognise what is not said as opposed to what is said. But we have to focus, and we really have to focus on the individual in front of us and see what they're saying and what they're not saying. And I say this because I'm really enthused about this, because there's a very large organisation, a global brand, who I'm talking with next week on this very topic. It's managing conversations, difficult circumstances, and it's about communication. And it's fundamentally, if I could leave with nothing else, it is when you're talking and you're meeting or you're engaging with somebody, make sure that is the most important thing for you to do. And as HR, we should be challenging our managers to do that, I say. So when we think about listening, what do we do when we listen? Well, again, we have so many distractions, and the management by video, when we talk about this new normal, that awful phrase, it is effectively management by video quite often. And I'm seeing cases trickling through now where things are being missed. People are feeling isolated, and with neurodiversity and with anxiety and depression and stress, these are massive issues that we really need to be focusing on. So lesson one is make the space and time, and not so much you, but your managers, make the space and time to listen, but fundamentally listen to what is not being said. Peter Drucker again, the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't being said to us. And with discrimination and disability, it's absolutely vital we do that, because it might be the person's off sick. It might be the person wants to tell you something, but you're not available. It might be that on video you can see here, it might be my hands down here are shaking, or I've got a bottle of vodka in my hand here that you cannot see. So it's so important now in this new normal, and I promise not to say that again, that we really focus on and reinvigorate and reevaluate what it is to be a manager and what it is to communicate and listen. You'll see in a moment, I've got 3 principles that I always stick to when we're looking at culture, which is the final one really, which is challenging the behaviour, because what I do now as part of my role is also big investigations. So I dealt with an investigation fairly recently with about conflict, one of a core team, really important team this was to the company, a multi-million-pound IT company, an infrastructure company, and there was conflict. One individual was creating utter hell for the rest of the team. Fundamentally what's happening though, is that it was an open plan office. So one of my first parts of the investigation was to go and look and watch and observe. And what I observed wasn't the individual being difficult, it was how many managers I could count around that individual. And it went like a web. And so when I started to interview, I think over 20 people, and they all said to me, this person is a problem, this person is discriminatory, this person is a bully, it became very awkward, because I then had to challenge the client to say, but actually your managers have been identified, and actually HR in a closed door is slightly is better for them, but your managers have been identified as being in the scene. Yeah, they were in the place where it was happening, and not one of them stepped up to challenge. And this is the problem with culture. It eats strategy for breakfast, because at the top, you looked at the strategy, the MD was telling me what a lovely company it was. HR was saying what a family environment it was. And yet you had one individual out of around 150 causing serious issues and presenting a risk of employment tribunal claim that they would have lost. But why, the bigger question I have, is why on earth weren't the managers challenging this? One of them admitted, I heard it, I didn't know what to do. Well, do you know what? The reason is it comes down to training, in my view, because I think what we do too much typically, especially in professional services companies, for those who work with solicitors, accountants, surveyors, estate agents, your top performers will usually become your top leaders and managers, but their skill set is not in management and leadership. And typically, and I say typically, and I'm happy to be challenged, that's because the training that focuses on leadership and management skills is down the list of priorities compared with sales skills, negotiation, marketing, networking. We put the client and the customer right at the top, as you normally would expect. But I challenge that and I say, why? Because if your employees aren't happy, how are they going to portray a better service, a better ethos to the client and the customer that pays the bill in the first place? So training for me is a fundamental failure in many of the cases that I do a bit of a post-mortem on, for a better expression, at the end of a case, and I say, where did this go wrong? And I can usually find a trigger, and that trigger often will fall down to lack of HR support because HR wasn't consulted, or failure of training. So the big mantra is be the change you want to see. As a manager and leader, the best ones I see are the ones who go out and challenge it. The 3 C's, for want of a better expression, is culture, communication, and challenge. Culture is one thing. You've got to communicate the culture through. And I'm preaching to the converted. I appreciate that with HR professionals. But the one thing that sometimes gets forgotten at the bottom is that challenge. We've got to challenge. And when you put it in the mix, I think you've got a cycle going through here of culture, communication, and challenge. And it has to continue to go around. But as soon as you miss out the challenge bit, because people are too scared, don't want to stand up, don't know what to do, think they might be accused of something, or just can't be bothered, then what you have is culture and communication, but at the bottom, you have the mishmash. And that's where the conflict arises. And that's where the risk of a legal claim arises, without doubt. So let's look at a typical scenario where we have a culture challenge. We have somebody defining, or people defining at the top, what is culture. This is our culture, these are our core values, and that's great. We might have policies and procedures and a handbook that may have been written 3 or 4 years ago. And that's no offense to anybody, so I'm sure you don't do that. But maybe we don't update them as and when we should do. Maybe when the culture changes, maybe when we're taken over, or we sell, or we buy, or we merge, are we looking at our policies and procedures? Do our policies and procedures really reflect what what our culture is, what our core values are, because it's not difficult to get hold of a handbook. Any solicitor, any HR practice consultant will sell you a handbook. You can grab it and run with it. But actually, do you need to look at in depth, how does that capability procedure run in your culture, with your core values? Is it just something that's picked up and used as a hammer? And you know, policies are like hammers. And from a claimant perspective, when I used to do more claimant work, it was great. It was really nice trick to demand policies and procedures that were relevant to what my client was being put through. Can I see the capability procedure? Can I see the welfare procedure? Can I see the quality and diversity procedure, or the bullying policy, that sort of thing? And I would say more often than not, I'd be able to attack it, because what was happening is it was put in the top drawer, it was available in the intranet, and it was picked up occasionally by managers who simply didn't know how to use it. So they might throw a capability procedure at somebody, they might throw a disciplinary procedure at somebody, or they might refer to the equality and discrimination policy, but they didn't know what they were using. They knew what they had. It's like having a hammer, but you've no idea what to do with it unless you really have used it before and you've been trained in it, because you're going to get hurt otherwise. And the pain's caused to the thumb, you whack your thumb, and at the same time, it's going to be caused to the thing you're hitting. With discrimination, unfair dismissal, and retention, they're the top three that I see where policy procedures have an impact upon those. Because if you apply a practice criterion or a policy, that PCP that we'll know about, in a discriminatory way, you've got a very difficult case then to get out of, because you wrote the policy, you communicated the policy, and you asked your managers to enforce that policy. If you get it wrong, maybe not in a discriminatory way, well, if you're unreasonably failing to follow your policies and procedures, no matter if the contract says they're non-contractual, you're still using them, relying upon them. If you get it wrong, you could be faced with a constructive unfair dismissal claim. And of course, in terms of retention, what's going to happen is your people will leave, and it might be your core people that leave. And I've got a very good example here. I supported a very close friend of mine through what was effectively a bullying allegation. And I hold my hands up now to, I used to be relatively dubious of bullying allegations, because quite often there was a whole tirade of what we call cross allegations between a manager or a conflict situation. It was one accusing the other. And it reminded me of my criminal law days when I used to be a criminal defence lawyer, where you typically have a difficulty, and the police have a difficulty where he said, she said. But true bullying allegations are really harmful. And initially, when a friend of mine who works in professional services was going through this issue, it was very, very subtle, as bullying usually is. It was a senior manager above him who was, it would be summed up with criticism. And the manager would only ever contact this individual when they wanted to criticize them. So they'd never get a phone call or email to say, I think you've done a good job on this. Or actually, the client said you've done really well. What would happen is the individual would be told what they hadn't done. The individual would be told about what the client had said about them in a negative capacity. Now, the manager, if they were asked, and they weren't asked for reasons I'll explain in a moment, would probably say, well, it was just feedback. This individual was being a bit too sensitive. And that's usually the classic response I get from employers when I was a claimant lawyer, fighting for employees. But actually, the harm caused, what I saw firsthand, was what was happening is the individuals then becoming very anxious about coming to work at all. They were getting very anxious about engaging with the individual manager on any way whatsoever, especially on the telephone. Because bullies tend to be relatively clever. They're not that clever, but they're not stupid enough to put in an email what they think about somebody. They'll do it in very subtle ways. And they'll say what they think about the individual over the phone, for the simple reason being, subconsciously, you can't prove a telephone conversation. It's very difficult. And so it was quite sad in a way, because it came to the situation where my friend I was working with very closely, as a lawyer, trying to fight his corner. In the end, I said to him, you've got to leave. You're going to have to leave the organisation. And he was a fantastic role, what he did was fantastic. And when he said to him, why have I got to leave, this isn't fair? It's simply because I said, I can't see this going anywhere, because the individual who was bullying him was at the top. He was part of the board level. And yet, when you looked at the culture, when you looked at the core values, when you looked at the video about recruitment, it was the most fantastic company you could ever work for. It was loving, it was family orientated, it was supportive. You looked at the bullying, the harassment and bullying policy, it was your classic. And we'll look at one in a moment. It was your classic line, I'll show you. How many times have we seen this? We're committed to providing a working environment free of harassment and bullying, and ensuring all staff are treated with respect, etc., etc. How many times have we seen that in our working lives? That's probably present in a lot of your policies and procedures right now. I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contracts and handbooks. I've probably only seen one anti-bullying and discrimination policy, and that's this, because it always says something like this, doesn't it? And this organisation had it. When I demanded it, when I wanted to see it, it said exactly this. But look what was happening. At the top, you had a bully. In the middle management, you had someone being bullied. Where could they go? What could they do? Now, as a lawyer, you'd say, well, that's the argument for me, isn't it? But the problem with it is why spend thousands and thousands of pounds on a problem you can't solve? Because again, it comes full circle to my view that the individual was not being challenged. Others were aware of it. We managed to establish that other managers were very aware of it. But as I said at the start, nobody was challenging the individual. They were all aware of it. No one had the guts, maybe didn't want the glory, but didn't challenge the manager at all. And so my friend left, moved on. But it's sad, and it happens. And I think bullying is underestimated. So I want to add two things to my little wonderful diagram that I'm going to share with you when I talk about communication and culture with managers and organizations. It's to add in these two things, because it's a sandwich, isn't it, really? Because you've got culture at the top, whatever that may be for your organization, and there's a whole variation of those. Culture at the top, and at the bottom, I fundamentally believe there's got to be the challenge, the ability to step up and say, that email you sent, I don't know if you meant it that way, but actually, this is how it came across. Or I've had a conversation with somebody and they think actually the way you spoke to them might be this. To do that, you've got to have the policies to back it up. As much as I might be talking about policies in a bad way or a blithely sort of way, you've got to have them. One is a legal requirement and because of best practice, but make sure they're tailored to you. But then look at the in-between bit. You've got to train people. You've got to train people on those policies and procedures, not just what they are, anyone can read them, but how does a capability procedure work? What is the role of occupational health? When is someone stressed? What do you do if you get a footnote that says work-related stress on it? That comes down to training. And so the challenge I like to give HR people, including myself, is when was the last time that I or they or your managers had updates on managing absence, on communication? When's the last time they read the policies and asked questions on them? And actually, one of the challenges I always have, especially in the sales environments, if I work with sales-orientated companies, is if one of the sales managers came into the team and said, I'm not in today, guys and girls, because I'm at a negotiation training session, or I'm going to a sales conference, people would go, oh, that's great. But how would that manager feel if they went in and said, I'm not in today because I'm going to a training workshop, or I'm going to a management or leadership training session? I just wonder how that would go down. Would they feel proud of saying that? Or do we sometimes feel it's a bit of a failure? But I'm a bit hard, because I tend to say to managers, if you think it's a bit of a failure, don't be a manager. Because if you've been promoted to be a manager because you're good at what you do, that doesn't make you a good manager. Don't bother doing it, because you're going to hurt somebody. You might actually hurt yourself as well, because you're reeling around a hammer with policies and saying things that actually you're not trained to talk about, and you need to be. So that's the challenge I leave with people, which is think about your managers, think about your leaders, challenge them. And there's a really good reason for this. Like right at the end, I use it as a bit of a scare tactic with HR training, but it's true. We'll come to that a bit later. Okay. So train and empower. We've got policies, we've got a culture, we've got core values, fantastic. So is every other company out there. Everyone's got them these days, haven't they? But are we training? Are we training and implementing properly? Are we training our managers on how to have these conversations? Are we training our managers on what the policies mean and how we use them? Are we letting our managers rule around hammers and not know what to do with them? And I had the past 6 months or so, I've been reflecting on some of the, what I would say, really good managers that I've met during my professional life. Ones I've had personally, but more often than not, it's managers in my clients that I've met. And I come up with a bit of a strategy. And you know what? This is actually, when I condense down what I think, my opinion, of what a really good manager that I've seen before is, it looks a bit like this. Because you know what? Good managers will take a culture, core values, and they'll start taking this strategy. I call it the bark, or the barking strategy, because they're brave. Because actually good managers, good leaders will be happy to challenge and say, I don't think that was the right thing. Or actually, how does that fit with our culture? Brave managers might even go a step further and say, actually, I tell you what, on every single meeting, rather than any other business, why don't we write down culture and core values? And why don't we ask people in the last month or since the last time we met, how do you feel about the core values and the culture? Has there been a challenge to that? Are you concerned about anything? And this came from a charity that I work with. At the bottom of their meetings, monthly meetings, they always have safeguarding, quite rightly so, because it wasn't being spoken about and things were being missed. But if it was an agenda, people might feel brave enough to say, actually, yeah, this thing happened or this incident happened. And so I say put safeguarding on it, but actually also put core values, culture. Because if it's on the agenda, people are going to feel brave enough, anonymously or otherwise, to come forward and say, you know what, I don't feel as though the way I was treated on this occasion, or maybe this email I received, or maybe that individual, or actually, are we losing sight of this? So I would say they're brave enough to challenge. Good managers are also available. And that's really, really delicate to say to a busy manager, because then they get shouted at, which is, well, you give me more time, I'll be available. But you know what? That comes down to my philosophy on this, which is, but you are a manager. You took the job. And I'm afraid that comes with responsibility, a huge amount of responsibility, especially in this world we're living in now, where mental health is rife, drug addiction and alcohol addiction is rife, and we'll look at some statistics later. But you've got to be available. It simply has to happen. And so you've got to make time for others. You've got to be reliable as well, because actually as a claimant lawyer, one of the easiest things to grab onto was the fact that when the manager met my client and said, we're going to refer you to occupational health, we're going to refer you to the EAP, we're going to do this, that and the other, and it was documented, and then it didn't happen. That was a happy day for me, because then I could actually just run with that particular thing there, because that one interaction may well be discriminatory. That one interaction may be a detriment if my client is whistleblown. The fact that the thing wasn't done and followed up can be evidence, intended or not, that my client's being treated a bit differently here, or actually the policy, procedure or criterion you think you're following, which is great, isn't, because you said you'd do this thing and you didn't do it. Good managers are knowledgeable, because you know what, the good managers in my experience are the ones who put their hands up and say, I need training. Yeah, I'm quite happy to go on a training course. I want communication learning. I want to know how to handle difficult conversations. I want to know about capability, absence management. What does occupational health mean? How do I coach? How do I develop? And I'm happy to share my team where I'm going on those. I don't feel ashamed in saying that I don't know everything. A good manager, I think, will come forward and say, I need help. I want to learn. And we'll go to HR and say, I've got a problem. You know, but when we see managers burying issues and trying to deal with a policy they don't know what they're doing with, or they haven't really told HR everything. So yeah, the person's gone off today, but they haven't said they've gone off with a mental breakdown, or they haven't said they've gone off today with a stress-related issue. So I think, if I encapsulate it, I think good managers are brave, good leaders are brave, they're available, they're reliable, and they're knowledgeable. Rightly or wrongly, you don't have to agree with me, but this is what I've seen, and this is what I think when I go out and I tell people what I think they should do about their management structure. I've spoken about this case before. Those who were on my webinar last year were talking about neurodiversity, and this came up, and actually I would urge you to read this case. I think every single HR person, professional person, should read this case, and the reason for that is not because we should anyway want to beat this manager up, and I feel very sorry for this manager. I think it's Mrs. Glancy she's called or something. I really do feel for her, and I don't use this case in training because I'm saying look what she did wrong. I don't mean it like that, because we can all make mistakes. I think there are also HR mistakes in here as well. But if you want to read a case where this goes from bad to worse very quickly, with someone who wasn't even employed, I don't think for even 2 years, and a manager who was floundering really with a policy she didn't know what to do with HR who weren't really supporting her too much, and an individual who had a disability and was struggling. So this is a case you really need to read, because ignore the names. Don't make it personal, but just put yourself in a situation. Because one of the things I talk about with managers is, with employment tribunal cases and employment appeal tribunal cases being published now to the world on the web, you could be named. You could be the Mrs. Glancy, I think it is. You could be Mrs. Glancy in that case. And unfortunately, you don't get a right of reply, do you? The judge will give his written reasons, often, as they'll be requested, especially will be appealed. And he'll talk about what findings of fact have been made. But he's had the benefit of listening to the evidence, the oral examination, the cross-examination. But you are still named in a judgment. Now, some of people will say, "I don't care, you know, I'm close to retirement." But think about early career, think about mid-career. You don't want that to happen, which is why I'm so passionate about making sure that people take management seriously, because it's not just HR who get in trouble with this in employment tribunal. You know, it's actually the manager as well who will be put in the box and named in that tribunal decision, and that hurts and it worries me. And that's one of the biggest things I tell to managers. Not many managers realise that because they're not told. So essentially, Sherborne and Empower, one to read, it evolves around Mr. Sherborne, who was autistic, and suffice it to say, essentially, it went from bad to worse. He was struggling in the environment he was in. He was in a noisy environment. He couldn't cope with the environment around him. He had a couple of breakdowns. In the end, he went off with suicidal thoughts. Tragic. This, I think, could have been avoided. I don't mean to say that in an arrogant way, but this really could have been avoided. What happened was, I'm pretty sure it's Mrs. Glancy. I want to say, let's call her the manager. The manager really didn't know what to do. Mr. Sherborne was having challenging behaviours. There was conflict arising in the team. I don't think she really knew how to handle it. So she consulted with HR. And so they sent her an online course to do with autism, and she watched that. Now, I'm sure there was more going on, but again, this is the portrayal of the employment tribunal decision. And so she watched an online webinar, I think, on autism. But in the end, it went from bad to worse. And so she offered him a lower paid job. She didn't let him work from home. He went off sick. She also had a period of sickness as well. But the worst thing about this case is they followed, in my opinion, the right process, because occupational health got involved pretty quickly. But unfortunately, the recommendations weren't followed. And this was an in-house doctor. This was Empower, you know, a big organisation. This isn't a small organisation. It wasn't followed. There was a welfare procedure, which I didn't see very often, and there was apparently a capability procedure. Not entirely sure the difference, but maybe there's more out there than I think. But unfortunately, she was swapping between the two and not really aware of which one to use when. And that didn't go well. We go back to our hammers. You know, policies are hammers, and she was wielding these hammers around, not really know what to do with them. I don't know where HR was. I don't know what was going on. The OH report came in. It's great, fantastic. There was consultation on the OH report, as there should be, but none of the reasonable adjustments were followed. And so we end up with Mr. Sherborne eventually being dismissed because his fixed-term contract was not renewed, and a claim for, I think, around £40,000, probably not far off his annual salary. You could say from one interaction that went wrong with Mrs. Glancy and Mr. Sherborne created a chain of events which led to a successful discrimination claim. And the judge is scathing. It's not a particularly nice judgment to read, and you can't but wince for this poor manager, who I will absolutely doubt say would have a different view on this. But you can see one of the quotes there: the detrimental action the tribunal finds was continuous management failures, not just one, continuous management failure. Please read Sherborne. And again, I would say that's failure to manage to give training and management properly, to know what was going on. What's neurodiversity? Let's give you some training, not just a webinar. Do we have a policy on this? You know, do we have a policy that you can use and you can engage, and we can train you and educate you on this? What are the reasonable adjustments? What does an OH mean? You know, what's a referral mean? What are reasonable adjustments? How do we do this? These are the kind of training that I think managers need in these situations. Please read Sherborne. I want to move on slightly, and I appreciate we've a lot to cover. So bullying and stress, as I say, I think actually bullying in particular is underestimated. And I think the reason for that is that not a lot of people really come forward and say, I am being bullied. Yes, they can use a policy. And I dealt with a case recently where I think HR have received numerous reports, multiple reports of an individual who was effectively bullying. And unfortunately, HR took the decision, because they wanted to remain anonymous, they didn't take it forward. Wrong decision. An organisation, an employer is entitled and sometimes should take forward a grievance and investigate, despite the fact you have people asking you not to. So I just want to flag that as something. I think HR sometimes say to her, we didn't do this because they said not to, or they didn't want to be involved, didn't want to remain anonymous. Well, that's not right. No, you must in some respects. Stress, we're going to talk about in a second, but bullying, I just want to flag bullying as an issue, especially with, again, management by video, a lot more phone calls going on, you know, a lot more WhatsApps. I'm seeing a lot more of those coming on, which I think is a bad idea anyway. On your personal phone, you've got your WhatsApp blinking away on a Sunday or something. But you know, we need to be aware of this. We need to be alive. Are our managers more alive now to watching what's going on, listening, observing, and being involved in their team to the extent of saying, how are you? You know, how are things? When conflict arises, do we look at disciplinary policy straight away? Or are we looking at maybe neurodiversity? Are we looking at maybe a bullying issue? Exit interviews, are we asking, are we really digging deep? Do we outsource exit interviews? I'm seeing a lot more of that now, when an independent HR person is appointed to do an exit interview. I think it's a great idea in some respect, because you really will probably get told what was going on. Bullying, remember, has no legal definition. ACAS try, tribunals will try, but it has no legal definition. I couldn't tell you what the legal definition of bullying is. I could tell you what the hundreds of policies I've seen say, but it's not legally defined. Like stress is not medically defined. You won't find a doctor saying stress is usually a combination of other things going on, or it's presentation of symptoms that are stress-like and linked to other things, as we'll see in a moment. And you've got health and safety obligations, of course, with stress and with bullying, safe system of workings, safe practices and risk assessments. But look at your hybrid and working from home policies. Look at them again, train people on them, really hammer it home, no pun intended with my hammer observation, but really say to people they've got to engage with their teams. Default to video means that you've got to be engaging somehow and seeing how people are. Remote working and all hours culture, a bit of a bugbear of mine is the all hours culture. And this is where the culture from the top, the disparity. Because if I look to the box to the right, you see, if you look at it, I got this email from an accountant, and I don't know what time I got it, but it said, I'm sending this now, but I do not expect you to respond until you're next at work. Brilliant. Because I wasn't actually at work, I accidentally clicked on my emails. That's fantastic. And I was working with a professional service firm fairly recently where they had this problem, where they were finding the senior executives were sending very late night emails and weekend emails. And you'd speak to the senior managers and they'd say, well, yeah, but there's no expectation to respond, because the juniors were saying anonymously in surveys, we feel stressed and we feel put under pressure because we'll check our emails after tea at 7, we check if we're going to bed at 11. And if there's an email there, my boss has sent it to me, I better respond. But what was happening is, what was interesting, and then that culture strategy for breakfast was, hang on a minute, the manager's saying you don't have to respond, but none of the managers has ever communicated that. No one had ever told the juniors, look, I might send you an email on a Sunday, that's because I work Sundays, or I might work on in the evening because I look after my children during the day. I don't expect you to respond. Communicate it. Because if it's not communicated, my suspicion is, what really is the culture? Is there an expectation that you will respond? And as a junior, yeah, you probably are worth more to me because you're willing to respond at 11 at night. Well done, you. It's not good and it's not clever. It hurts people. And it hurts people in a really, really big way. So I think it's so important as HR people, we challenge, we have a hybrid policy, we have a working from home policy, we have a communications policy, we have an IT policy, we have all these wonderful policies, all these hammers that we can pick up and throw around, scrap them and say, what's our policy? What's our policy? And when you send me an email at 11 o'clock at night, am I expected to respond? Because if I choose not to, how will that hurt me in the future? And that's a massive question. You might better prove it or establish it, but I'm seeing more and more and more of this now happening. And if you are working out of hours, as many people do quite rightly, or work different hours as normal, whatever that may be, tell people, be honest and say, I don't want to respond, it's fine. Yeah, good managers, I think, will say that. They'll set the expectations and intervene if you see the problem. Work-related stress, I want to gloss over work-related stress. I think it's still a big issue. I want to refer you to a recent research program that's done on Footnotes, which is fascinating. I suggest you read it all about Footnotes. But there are legal risks, of course, of Footnotes and stress, because it can give rise to claims of trust and confidence, breaches, statutory duties, negligence is one that's always missed, unfair dismissal, discrimination as well. But just dealing with the personal injury side of things and negligence, that's a claim of 3 years. So we look at 3 months with employment, don't we? Think, oh, the clock's ticking 3 months, that's all right, they've gone. Well, no, psychiatric harm, personal injury, stress claims, linked to personal injury and mental harm, there's 3 years. So we shouldn't be sitting pretty because someone's left, because actually a claim could come. You need to be very alive to that, because people will drop everything at 3 months and say we're safe. Not always. And I do wonder whether with stress in particular, is it the HR issue that seeks a solution? Because actually I'm fascinated, and the wonderful privilege I have now is speaking to so many HR people. And the different solutions I have to stress given to me is amazing. I love it, but actually there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to stress. It's very difficult. And the classic footnote problem, you get a footnote, work-related stress. I will send these out later next week, but there is a wonderful bit of research done by a chap called Dorrington. I think Dorrington, if you just do Dorrington and BMJ, the British Medical Journal, It's all about Footnotes. It's the most recent I could find. But no surprise here. It talks about mental disorders are the single most common reason for Footnotes, 30% nationally. So 30% doesn't sound a lot, but nationally, that's quite a lot, I would say. Now, multiple Footnote use, as in more than one Footnote going forward, is associated with mental illness and stress-related problems. Now, from the HR perspective, I think what's really interesting, and one I've always suspected, is look at this. Information on the Footnote may differ from information in the clinical notes for reasons as the individual confidentiality or clinician's preference. Now, the learning outcome for that is what I always say to HR, is you can't take a Footnote at face value, because that's telling you there from the horse's mouth, HR, the GP will know, and if you read the report, it talks about the GP being aware that they put alcohol misuse or drug misuse on a Footnote. They're not stupid. GPs know what the employer is going to do. So you might get work-related stress, you might get personal stress factors, but you cannot take a Footnote at face value. Read that report, share it with your senior managers, and just be aware, receiving a Footnote, relying on it, I would advise is not the right thing to do, especially with mental health and stress in play. Risk assessments. If I did a quick survey now, I would like to think you all come back with, yes, we follow the HSE risk assessment management standards, and we always have these out ready for every single job spec and job description. I don't often see them, actually, and it was really satisfying as a claimant lawyer to write to the employer and say, please disclose by return, as in tomorrow, my client's risk assessments for their job. And there'll be silence. And then I get a letter from this solicitor saying, please contact me from now on, which really said to me they haven't got one. And I have sympathy with that, because they're not particularly easy to run through, but there needs to be one. Don't wait to be asked to disclose all relevant policies and up-to-date risk assessments. Try and get them done. Be prepared is the mantra. I think the best advice, I'm going a bit fast, quickly, deliberately because of time, but I think the best advice with stress is you've got to think about mental health with stress. Most Footnotes you'll see in the report are one-offs. They are one-offs, but actually many will be linked to other things, especially work-related stress or just stress. You've got to be thinking a bit more. You've got to be thinking about occupational health. You've got to consult on solutions. So work with the individual. Don't close down the barriers. Don't let a manager put their head in the sand and say, oh, I don't know what to do. They've gone off sick with stress. I don't know what to do. Silence is one of the worst things you can do from a claim perspective, especially. Because the allegation will be, my client put a Footnote into you, said they were work-related stress, you did nothing. And in the background, everything's going on. Occupational health referrals, discussions, meetings, risk assessments, communicate, set up weekly meetings if you need to, if they're off, but deal with it head on. Talk to the person about the stress. I'm sorry to hear you're feeling stressed. We need to look at this. How do we do this? How can we help you? But do not wait for the last minute. I've got a case actively at the moment where I've had an individual who's been off for a year, work-related stress and mental health issues, a very big organization, and only now has he been referred to occupational health. Fundamentally dangerous, because anything done before that point was done without knowing the true medical position. You've got to establish true medical position. You can only do that by taking a Footnote at face value, which, as we've just established, is not the best idea, or you need to get help and assistance with that through occupational health or an expert. Okay. So to finish up there, that's my sort of views on culture, whizzing through. And again, you might be thinking, who is this clown telling me about culture and core values? These are my observations from real cases and real things that I work with and deal with in training. And I promise you, I do think there's a problem in management. I do think people aren't trained enough on management. We focus on the client and profit, which is wonderful, but we still have managers responsible for their people and their well-being who aren't properly trained. And if you get it wrong, as you can see, culture is strategy for breakfast. I want to whiz through a couple of cases that I think all HR people need to be aware of. Disability discrimination is still the one that makes us all stay up at night. It's the one that I think is still the most difficult to wrestle. That's even for me to say as well. And a friend of mine is an employment judge and barrister and has the same view. And normally what it comes down to is, what is a disability? I'm always amazed when an HR person refers me a case and says, don't worry, they're not disabled. And I said, thank you very much. That's very nice of you to say so. What opinion is that? It's an assumption. Now, often it may be, there is no disability. Well, he's got hay fever. Well, hay fever isn't a disability, but asthma is. Could be. So hang on a minute, have you thought about the asthma? Have you thought about the hay fever triggering the asthma that causes the absence? So are you making assumptions? But this is difficult stuff. Yeah, we need to be very careful here. But always go back to the law. What's a disability? Section 6 Equality Act should be there on your favourites page. Keep looking at it, yeah? Because there's lots of ifs and. The first one is, you're not disabled if you haven't got a physical and mental impairment. But if you've got a physical and mental impairment, it has to be and that or they have to have a substantial long-term effect on your ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. Case law helps us here a bit, really, because there's guidance also available for this. We know we've got the HRC and we've got the Statutory Equality Act guidance. What was happening before a case called Elliott in Dorset County Council, which I've not put on there, but that's the case, is HR, occupational health, and I think to an extent solicitors as well, were getting carried away with what was substantial, because there'd be huge arguments over it. But actually, do you know what? The case of Elliott made this quite clear. If a mental or physical impairment is having a substantial impairment on the individual, you stop. There is no need to then start jumping around with guidance and guidance notes and EHRC code. Because if the answer is yes, you can't get to a no, as His Honour Judge Taylor said, by looking at the code or the guidance again. So the questions you go through are here, and I will send these out next week for you to look at, but you need to be aware of these. You need to think about these when you're advising. Is there a mental or physical impairment? Yes, okay, jump to the next one. Does the impairment affect the individual's ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities? But focus on normal day-to-day activities, focus on what they cannot do or focusing on what they cannot do or can only do with difficulty. Because actually what I do see a lot of solicitors doing is focusing on what they can do. Well, no, that's not relevant. It's what they cannot do that you need to be looking at. And does it have an adverse effect? Well, it's bound to, really, isn't it? But then is that adverse effect substantial? And that's got to be more than trivial. And then finally, there's the long-term effect. But keep this in your mind, because when you get a footnote in, whatever it may say, you've got to be thinking, I need OH. I need OH for these reasons, or I need to be on high alert for these reasons, but you've got to have the law in your mind at all stages. I frequently talk about this with HR and on webinars and talks and training that I do, but you've got to, and I say you, your organisations, those you help and represent, have got to work from the true medical position. The true medical position, when you're looking to dismiss somebody under a capability procedure on a footnote that you got 6 months ago, is not the true medical position. The true medical position is going to be an occupational health report that is either, and I would say on their call, not yours, either encapsulates and includes medical notes or it doesn't. Because what can happen is employers can jump straight to getting an AMRA consent under the NHS to go and get medical notes disclosed to them. And they get these medical notes. Well, I don't want to look at medical notes. I'm not a doctor. What's that going to tell me? I might do it in a claim or when tribunal claims are started, but you need occupational health to guide you here. You're in dangerous territory, I think, if you're making decisions on one single footnote or multiple footnotes or with medical notes alone. You need help and guidance. I'm not the right person because, as you saw, my 10 qualifications in psychiatry and psychology, I'm not going to help you, but I am going to help you get the right guidance. And I'm going to help you look at the definition in law of what a disability is. So please always work from the true medical position and don't rubber stamp the advice. Gallup is now nearly 8 years old, but Gallup was a case where the employer was saying, receiving an occupational health report, which is plainly wrong, which said that the employer was not disabled, and they just ran with it. And they thought they could defend a case on the basis that the OH was saying, not disabled, not disabled, not disabled, and they were. True medical position, up-to-date relevant position, I always say is 3 months. You can't go wrong with thinking of the 3. 3 months, 3 years, you can work on that basis. In employment law, that's usually a three involved somewhere. 3 months, I would say, is up-to-date medical position. Spot unusual behaviour. This is an old case, DWP Hall for 2005, but it's relevant. It's an interesting case because actually the employer had no idea really, but was on the hook for disability because of what they didn't see or didn't listen to. And it comes back to our first conversation back along those slides earlier, doesn't it? The managers watching what wasn't being said or were missing behaviours, the meltdowns, the crying, the conflict, the absence. This individual had said no impairments on this new starter form. They made a benefit application for, I think some form of sickness allowance. They've been told about medication, but never at any stage were they told by the employee, I'm ill or I've got a disability. And yet the Employment Appeal Tribunal said, but you had knowledge. Very dangerous. So your managers have to be trained and have to be attuned to what they're looking at. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What's going on in their teams and their environments, and they can report back to you and engage with HR properly after being trained on what to look for. I want to cover very quickly, I'm afraid, two things: protected acts and GP, and then we're going to stop, I promise. So this is a case that came out in the last, I think, 48-ish hours. I think the tribunal must have loved it. So Robin's doing a webinar. Let's lob out 5 cases that are really going to throw in. So I've covered these. I think they're really important because they don't happen very often. But please read fuller. It's very technical. Don't read it at night, whatever you do. But it's very technical and difficult to read. But it's actually quite interesting because it's a bit of a classic situation. You've got an individual who's making multiple grievances, unfounded grievances, we think, to an extent, about race discrimination, to his line manager. Imagine trying to line manage an individual who's making serious complaints about you. Mr. Fuller even made employment tribunal claims whilst in employment. And don't forget, with discrimination, whistleblowing, and protected acts, you can do that. You don't have to leave. This was going on. Multiple complaints, multiple claims. He was dismissed on the second employment tribunal case being dismissed. So his employment tribunal case was dismissed, it lost. And then the employer said, we've had enough, we're suspending you. We're suspending you because we can't cope with the conflict. We think there's a fundamental failure and a breakdown in the relationship, and we need you. We need to think about this. And it may be an SOSR, personality clash, or breach of trust and confidence. Unfortunately, what had happened was no one had looked at the nexus, that connection between a protected act, and we'll come to see what that means in a minute, and the suspension. Because watch this, what happened was the protected act itself, and let's look at what a protected act is under Section 27 of the Equality Act. You need to know this, or at least have a rough idea where to get it. It's bringing proceedings under the Equality Act. Protected Act, tick. There were 2 of them. Giving evidence about one, doing any other thing, raising a grievance potentially, making allegation of discrimination. A detriment, I'm going to jump into this side now, is any step really viewed from the victim's perspective. That means, the way I put it is the way that they would say they've been treated or punished. That's the non-legal way of putting it. It's not very intellectual, but that's the way I look at it. But this case is a huge reminder to HR, is that when you're looking at detriment cases for whistleblowing or protected acts under the Equality Act, you can't view it from your perspective. You can't view it of, well, he was suspended because he's being disruptive, and it can't have been a detriment due to protected act. No, you've got to view it from the victim's perspective. Yeah, what was he thinking about it? What did he view it as? Would the reasonable worker consider it as a detriment? Massive risk, because it had been missed. It might have been alive, and there are other ways they could have dealt with this, I won't go into now, to try and remove it. But there's case law on this in 2003, nearly 18 years old. So you need to be aware of this. And finally, it's not all lost, because you do need to connect in a claim the detriment and the protected act, and he clearly could do it in this case. I feel very sorry for the employer. I don't know the facts. I mean, it sounds like Mr. Fuller had a horrendous time. Need to be careful. 2 more slides, I promised, then we're done. I could not have a webinar without the word black dog hydrotherapy in it. It sounded wonderful, so I thought we'd talk about it. But it raises an important TUPE issue, and this is actually a really important case, I think, from a geeky perspective. Anyone who loves TUPE, you're a bit strange, but also you might want to read this, because it's really technical in the way the Employment Appeal Tribunal follows through what happened here. Essentially, boiling down this case for you, quite simply, it is never okay not to inform under TUPE who the new employer is to the employee. Let me rephrase that. In a business sale, it's quite common for a business to maybe purchase another business and set up a new limited company to be the ultimate employer. It's even more common in the smaller transactions. In this case here, it was a sole trader selling to a sole trader, so no limited company. It wasn't a big company, and in fact, to make it worse, this poor lady who sold the company did it as a hobby, as a lifestyle, and got into trouble with the Employment Tribunal. This lady sold her hydrotherapy dog business to another sole trader who was an employee, but the employee formed a limited company who became the employer. You might say, what's the problem with that? Well, there is a problem with it, because the Employment Tribunal at the first stage didn't think it was a problem. They said, well, this is only a technical breach, it's not really a problem, and they refused to put a penalty from a better expression of compensation of a fixed amount on the employer. Unfortunately, the Employment Appeal Tribunal has reiterated and confirmed it. It's never okay under TUPE not to tell the employees who will transfer the identity of the new employer. Now, it might not rise too much, but if you're dealing with TUPE, you've got to be alive to who the ultimate employer is going to be. And if you know it's going to be, You need to think about how you communicate that. If you're acting, helping, assisting, or part of a group company, and there's another part of the group company is going to be the ultimate employer, you need to be flagging this, saying, guys, you need to communicate this, especially when you're a micro business under the regulations, as in less than 10. You're not electing representatives, and you're not going through that rigmarole. You're consulting directly. So if you like GP, by all means, have a read of Black Dog Hydrotherapy. It's a great name. It's interesting, but it does reiterate something. We don't have huge amount of GP cases coming out the Employment Appeal Tribunal, so it is exciting when it happens, one of a better expression. I'm going to shut up, which you might be pleased to know, because I'm sure plenty of you want to get back to work. But I do hope, if nothing else, you've thought to yourself, I'm good, I'm done, I'm doing everything that Robin says, I think I'm fine. But I also hope there might only just be one thing. Like it or not, you might think, yeah, and he's got a point. And I don't come at this saying I know more than you. I come at this from dealing with in a very dark world that I deal in, which is basically when things go wrong, and also being responsible for training from various amounts of companies from different sizes. So I'm going to jump to the chat, Joe. Are we jumping to that? Is that?
Yeah, there's only a couple of questions. So Claire's asked, with regards to policies, is it not still sufficient to say that you use ACAS code of practice rather than a specific policy?
Do you know, I see that a lot. I'm going to assume that's in relation to disciplinary grievances, I wonder. I see it a lot. I don't think it's, what I would say is I don't know what that means, because why wouldn't you do that? So I don't know if I'm being pedantic. Maybe if the person wants to email me, and I'm more than happy to have a phone conversation or email back. But I do see it a lot. I've seen it, funny, I think it's quite scary. I've seen one in the past couple of weeks who said exactly that. We'll follow all our case guidance or whatever. But I'm worried about it. So I don't really know what that means. So my response to people is, why wouldn't you do that anyway? You have to. So yes is the answer. It probably is okay, but at the same time, I would probably say you might want to go a bit further.
Okay, and then there's just the other one's more of a comment when you were talking about emailing out of hours and things like that, and they've said, what about in global businesses where people work global time zones? Yeah,
I'd love to know. I'd love to say what I want to say, but I'm not going to. Unfortunately, I think it comes down to expectations. That's all I can really say, isn't it? It is right to say, and I've got friends who work in investment banking, and they will frequently have sort of 1, 2 in the morning phone calls with America or whatever it may be. I've got another friend of mine who works in property globally. So yes, I think I would say on that is set the expectations, but maybe be realistic as well, or maybe just be aware, or I'd probably say beef up your well-being and mental health and stress activities. Because if that's happening on a continuous basis, we all have those late nights. But if it's happening on a continuous basis, I don't like it. I think, so yeah, there's not a lot you can do about it, but that's a really stupid thing to say. I don't like saying that. If it's global, then there should be some form of communication policy. It might be, you need to have a call at 3 in the morning or 11 at night, that's fine. But if we're talking about general emails, set the expectation. When does this need to be responded to? You know, I would do it that way. But
yeah. Okay, so I suppose just sort of finishing up now, if anyone has got any further questions, Robin's got his email address there, so please feel free to sort of make note of them. We will send out some correspondence to the people that signed up for the event, and I will be putting a post on LinkedIn. So if you can put a comment on LinkedIn, if you want the slides or you want a copy of the recording, then that would be appreciated. We've got another webinar in 2 weeks on a Wednesday, April the 6th. That's about diversity and inclusion accredited approach. So please feel free to join that. The link will be on the email that's sent out. Finally, if anyone is recruiting, we've also got accountancy recruit and FD recruit within the group. But ultimately, I'd just like to say a massive thanks for Robin for his time, and also to everybody for tuning in. Thank you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.